launched an independent third-party review. Meanwhile, Premier Scott Moe is back from China and doing a victory lap after Canada reached a preliminary deal to significantly reduce tariffs on canola and peas. Well, with reaction to all of this news and more, the 306 panel is back, our first gathering of the new year, and we have a new member for you to meet today. Jennifer Laewetz is a member of the George Gordon First Nation and CEO of Paskwâw Strategies in Prince Albert. And then, of course, our veteran panelist, Jack Saddleback, is a professional speaker in Saskatoon. Good afternoon, Jack.
Good afternoon.
And welcome to the panel in the 306, Jennifer.
Hello.
Before we dive into the top stories, I'd love for the 306ers to get to know Jennifer a bit better. Jennifer, just tell us about some of the work you do and Paskwâw Strategies.
Oh, icebreaker is my favorite. Yeah. So, Indigenous governance specialist. So I work with First Nations across Western Canada. And a lot of my work is rooted in Indigenous governance. So helping nations, achieve sovereignty and their autonomy and working through the bureaucracy that is the federal government. So that's a lot about what I do.
It's a very good summary. What kind of inspired you? What drives you to do this kind of work?
Well, interestingly enough, I took an undergrad in political science and then started learning a whole lot about the federal government and our relationship with the Crown. And what better way to work within those systems than to understand them? So went into that field and then worked for a member of parliament from Saskatchewan for over 6 years to understand that side of things. And then took that education with me to the other side across the medicine line to work with nations.
It's great work, important work, and we appreciate having you here on the panel. Let's talk about hospital safety and security. The government announced a third-party review today. Jack, how would you describe the government's handling of this issue?
This is an issue that has been, as we've heard, ongoing with not only within our province, but across Canada. We are seeing a rise in the rates of violence against healthcare workers and within the systems themselves. The SHA, I think, along with many other health authorities, are grappling with how to deal with such a complex issue because, this is just a symptom of a much larger happening that's taking place, with the rise of mental health and addiction complexities. This is one of those spaces that we see the rise of violence. Now, with the SHA, I think it's important that they do look at their security measures, as we've seen within some of the articles that have come out, that security guards, from my understanding, have 100-ish hours in the SHA of training, but the minimum in Saskatchewan, I believe, is about 40 hours. So, we're hearing some mixed numbers here, but regardless, I think having a look at what is taking place and how to be able to deal with these issues is important in this day and age.
Yeah, Jennifer, how do you feel about adding metal detectors to hospitals and the government also saying that they're going to hire more security guards as well?
Well, my first thought was the fact that the government is looking to bring in these metal detectors is essentially an admission of what frontline workers have been saying for a very long time, that conditions are not safe. We know that our healthcare capacity in this province is stretched pretty thin. And inevitably, when, society is seeing areas and gaps that are becoming more detrimental by the day, addictions, mental health, homelessness, poverty, all of those things, that should be where our focus lies, is the preventative measures rather than jumping in to try to, be reactive all the time. Hospitals are supposed to be a place of care and to make sure that people feel safe. And I think even the perception, going into these hospitals now, feeling like you're going into an airport, is telling us that the preventative measures really, really need to be at the forefront.
Yeah, Jack, is there anything more to be said on that? We've obviously talked about root causes and things many times here on the show, but just do you feel like this is just a Band-Aid solution to a bigger problem?
I hope that this actually, yes, is a Band-Aid solution in the short term, but that we're going to be addressing much more deeper problems that Jennifer has been able to allude to as well. We are looking at aspects of what is happening in the world of social services, what is happening in the world of complex care needs for folks who are dealing with that mental health, addictions, and poverty. I feel that maybe this insights that the report will be able to offer, that the Saskatchewan government will actually take some action, deeper action, because the funding cuts that have been happening over the how many years now, this is a symptom of that, these funding cuts.
Yeah, as you both mentioned, we've been talking, or nurses, healthcare workers have been talking about this for years, and obviously the timing is interesting and possibly motivated in terms of getting things going a little faster in terms of the death of the cancer patient, Trevor Dubois in Saskatoon, who died after an altercation with security. We still don't know exactly what happened in that incident. The family and the Saskatoon Tribal Council say not enough information was provided to the family. Jennifer, just what do you make of that entire situation?
I think, hearing about where the frontline workers have been struggling, especially in terms of their safety, we've been at capacity. I did see on social media today, there was pictures floating around of the amount of weapons that SHA has had to recover in recent time. There is concern around safety. I think that's a no-brainer. And I think when we're, at our max capacity with our healthcare system in this province, inevitably there are going to be things that are happening as a result of that. Patients should never be dying in the care of hospitals. That should not be a thing. So I think Tribal Chief Mark Arcand and every other advocate that's been calling for transparency is absolutely correct in this, but also not just calling for the transparency, but how is SHA and the province going to respond to this so that it doesn't happen again?
Jack, do you have any thoughts on, again, the details are still very minimal when it comes to Trevor Dubois, but again, this was an altercation with security staff, and now we're adding more security. Do you have any concerns about that going forward?
Well, it will create more barriers, I think, for people who do have challenges with systems of authority. And I use that very loosely because sometimes people who, within those security roles could bring biases with them. And I'm not saying that this particular situation or other situations are directly related to biases, but when adding more security in regards to personnel, we need to be able to have proper training that addresses unconscious biases. So I do think that having metal detectors is one way to be able to address maybe removing any sort of weapons that could be coming in, but we also have to deal with the complex needs of mental health and addiction issues, to which that's where we're seeing, quote unquote, a lot of frequent flyers come in are dealing with those types of complex needs. So how can we ensure that all parties are being given the best support to address that?
Before we move on, Jennifer, I wanted to ask you, the NDP has also been criticized by the Tribal Council for politicizing this case and this story. How do you feel about that? Is it using a tragedy to their advantage, or are they just doing their job as the opposition?
I think when it comes to the opposition in any level of government, there's obviously going to be pushback on how opposition responds. In one breath, that's their job, is to be very critical of the government of the day and to basically say how they would do it better. On the other hand, it is a sensitive and a serious issue. And, when we see politicians with podiums and things like that, it does turn people the wrong way. But I'm in the middle of the aisle on this one. I understand the role of the opposition. I fully support the NDP needing to do what they need to do. And on the other side of things, it's personally, yes, it does look a little iffy and icky sometimes, but that's politics, right? So.
All right. Well, let's turn to the Canada-China trade deal. Jennifer, Jack, and I talked about it for pretty much a full year on this panel. The tariffs on canola and peas are expected to be significantly reduced. Jack, let's let you have first word, since you did have to weigh in on this so many times over the past months. How significant of a deal is this specifically for Premier Moe?
For the province of Saskatchewan, this is huge. When the news of the tariffs coming down, Moe was very vocal in regards to the impact that it would have on the Saskatchewan economy. So fast forward to now, I think it is quite right that it's nice that he's able to at least take a little bit of a short victory lap. We don't know how long this victory lap is going to be because, as we know, with international politics right now, day to day, everything changes. But needless to say, I think this is a big win for Saskatchewan. And if I can add, when we were having these discussions about the tariffs, we had a much different government that was taking shape at that point in time. Carney was just starting to get his wheels greased. There was still Moe talking about his ex-Trudeau, and now in today's weekly news update, we hear that hopefully Scott Moe has gotten over Trudeau, and he's starting to see that Mark Carney has come to play ball and create a stable economic environment here in Canada.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue for you, Jennifer. I mean, how do you feel about this kind of change in relationship between our province and the federal government?
I think this is actually a very, very significant moment in Saskatchewan's relationship with the federal government. This is much, much different than we saw under the Trudeau era. this is not only a win for Premier Scott Moe, but it also signals that there's cooperativeness coming from the Liberal government as well. And this is a win for farmers. Canola is it's the cornerstone of our economy here in Saskatchewan. So this is a win for the farmers, and Moe needed to deliver on that. Politically here in Saskatchewan, it is a little bit of a distraction from what's going on with healthcare and education and other areas that the Sask Party has traditionally been under fire for. They're now delivering, a win for farmers and their rural voters, where a lot of their support comes from. But I think we can all, stop for just a second and appreciate the fact that we are seeing our province work with our federal government. It's a change. It's a nice change. But on the other side of things, it's almost like a little bit of a subtle step back from the federal Conservative Party that Scott Moe seems to be taking a little bit of a different line on when it comes to their stance on things, especially China.
Yeah, Jennifer, do you think there's any political risk for the government, the Saskatchewan Party, not having that opposition in the federal government? Because it has obviously rallied a lot of people behind them.
I think there's a little bit of a risk with the relationship between, some of the more ideological conservatives that really support that populist movement, more of the very high level, we don't like Trudeau, we don't like anything to do with the Trudeau era, or the Liberal government. But we have to be practical and move away from just being confrontational all the time. But it is going to be interesting to see how that relationship plays out with the Alberta Premier right now, with our own Premier.
Jack, Ontario Premier Doug Ford, he's unhappy with the deal, and it's understandable because of the automotive sector, of course. This deal includes 49,000 electric vehicles from China being allowed to come to Canada. Now, it must be said that it is, that a lot of people in this province think that the federal government only deals in Eastern interests, and I just wonder how you feel about the EV side of this deal.
Well, as an individual who drives a gas-powered vehicle, if I may say, I am very curious about EVs, though. I think here in Canada, we have so many opportunities to be able to build up an infrastructure system, which we unfortunately currently don't have, and that's my main reasoning for sticking with a gas-powered only, is that once we get this infrastructure, we can certainly look at our plants here in the country of building up that base of EV. But unfortunately, that infrastructure is not there. And I do recognize the concern that's happening from Premier Ford when you look at Windsor, Ontario, and the amount of the automotive market that is in that space is huge. So I am curious to see on what this is going to look like as we move forward, because you got to be able to incentivize the Canadian population to buy more.
Did they just have no other choice, Jack, do you think, that they had to make a deal? They had to weigh the pros and cons of each side of this, obviously?
I think so, and it comes back to that infrastructure as well. I travel up to northern Alberta quite often, and there's not a lot of EV charging stations up there. It's getting better, but it's not necessarily there. And we have a large country, so how are we going to be able to set up spaces for people to feel safe enough or confident enough to be able to buy an EV and solely look at being able to power their vehicle?
Jennifer, do you think this does anything in terms of, does it put a dent in the attitudes of Western alienation to say, hey, we kind of chose canola over the Ontario automotive sector here?
I'm not entirely sure about that. I think, Premier Scott Moe would be smart to focus on ag and not get lost in the EV fight, because I don't think it's a winnable policy position to take with even his own voters in Saskatchewan right now. And especially with these cold temperatures and all of this snow, I don't think even trying to enter that arena of we want to be in this industry is top priority. But at the same time, that's what makes politics so complicated is, yes, we have a Conservative Premier in Saskatchewan, a Conservative Premier in Alberta or in Ontario that have historically been pretty friendly with one another. But there is that Western-Eastern divide that, we have to take care of our economy. They have to take care of theirs. And if there are areas where Saskatchewan can enter the conversation when it comes to anything economy related, whether it's EVs, agriculture, all of those beautiful things, I think we should be exploring those options and not fighting with all of our partners across the country. But again, Ontario is always on the map, and Saskatchewan typically feels left out. Well,
Jack, Jennifer, great start to the new and improved. Sorry, Dale. I don't mean to say improved, but the fantastic new 306 panel. Thank you so much to you both.
Thank you.
Thanks.